Ever wonder what the very first official step is for someone wanting to, you know, throw their hat in the ring and become a politician in the Philippines, whether they're aiming for a local council seat or even the highest office? There's this foundational piece of paper involved. Today on The Deep Dive, we're cracking open the Philippine Certificate of Candidacy Law to understand this crucial document. Think of it as the absolute starting line, really.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. For many people, election law can feel, well, complicated, daunting even, but at its core, it just establishes the essential processes. Our mission here is to demystify the Certificate of Candidacy, or the COC. We'll explore what it is, what happens the instant it's filed, and why this seemingly simple piece of paper carries such significant weight in the Philippine electoral landscape. And we're drawing directly from the legal texts themselves to bring you the key insights.
Okay, so let's get down to it then. What exactly is a certificate of candidacy? What does this document actually, entail?
Simply put, the Certificate of Candidacy is a formal, legally required document. Anyone intending to run for an elected public office in the Philippines must file this with the Commission on Elections, COMELEC. It's their official declaration, their intention to seek a specific position.
So it's basically the official I want to be on the ballot declaration, like putting your name forward formally.
Precisely. And its main purpose is really twofold. First, to ensure the person meets all the legal requirements to run for that particular office. And second, it clearly and officially states their intention to be a candidate. It's their formal commitment, you could say, to participate in the election and, importantly, abide by the rules.
Right. And what does filing this actually do? Like, what are the immediate effects or functions? Does everything change the moment it's filed?
Well, filing a COC sets off several important processes. For the individual, yes, it's their official entry into the electoral race. That's a big one. For COMELEC, it provides the necessary information to manage and oversee the entire election. Keep track of who's running for what. It also fosters transparency. This formal filing procedure helps prevent, say, last-minute candidate surprises or withdrawals that aren't properly documented. And naturally, the COC itself contains vital information about the aspiring candidate, their name, the specific office they're running for, statements about their eligibility, residence, citizenship, all the basic crucial details.
Okay, so without a COC, you're just out before you even start. You can't just, decide on election day you fancy being a senator.
Exactly right. The fundamental point is no valid COC filed with COMELEC, no legal candidacy. It is the essential first step. Period.
Now, this is interesting. You mentioned that filing a COC makes you a candidate, but then you also hinted at a subtle point about when you officially become a candidate for, campaign roles. Can we explore that distinction a bit?
Certainly. It's a really important nuance. When a valid COC is filed, the individual legally becomes a candidate for the office they've indicated. That's the initial legal consequence. However, Republic Act 9369, the automated election law, introduces a specific distinction. It says that for the specific purpose of campaign period regulations, a person only officially becomes a candidate at the beginning of the designated campaign period.
Okay, hold on. So you file the COC, you're a candidate in one sense.
Okay.
But the rules about when you can officially start campaigning, putting up posters, all that stuff, that's linked to the formal campaign period, what's the significance of this separation? Why have that distinction?
The main implication relates directly to premature campaigning, which is basically electioneering before the official campaign period starts. Under the older rules, specifically Section 80 of the Omnibus Election Code, engaging in premature campaigning could actually get you disqualified.
Wow, that's a serious penalty. So what changed? Why isn't that the case anymore? Is it more complicated?
Well, RA I-9369, and crucially, the Supreme Court's decision in Paravio COMELEC back in 2009 significantly changed the landscape here. The Supreme Court essentially ruled that premature campaigning is no longer punishable before the official campaign period actually begins. It sort of neutralized that old rule.
So let me get this straight. Even if someone has filed their COC way ahead of time, maybe months before, and starts holding rallies, giving speeches, getting their name out there, as long as the official campaign hasn't started, it's now generally permissible. They can't be kicked out for that.
That's the gist of it, yeah. The reasoning behind the Panera ruling is that even with a filed COC, an individual isn't fully considered a candidate for the specific rules governing campaign conduct until that official period begins. Yeah. Therefore, activities before then, while obviously aimed at gaining support, don't trigger the penalties associated with violating campaign rules.
Right. So the key takeaway here for someone listening is that filing the COC doesn't immediately put you under the microscope for campaign violations. There's this window.
Exactly. It means the period before the official campaign can be a really significant and largely unregulated phase for building support and name recognition.
That's a major shift in the landscape. Filing a COC gets the ball rolling, but the full campaign regulations don't kick in right away. Okay, got it. Now, what about individuals who are already holding public office? Does filing a COC have a different effect on them? Say, a sitting mayor or governor?
It absolutely does, yes. And there's a crucial difference depending on whether they are currently elected or appointed officials. Let's take elected first. For current elected officials, Section 66 of the Local Government Code is key. It states that if they file a COC for an elected position that is different from the one they currently hold, they are automatically considered resigned from their current post. It's what's called an ipso facto resignation.
Ipso facto, meaning by the very fact of filing, boom, they're considered resigned. That sounds incredibly dramatic.
It is a significant consequence. The main reason, the rationale behind it, is to avoid conflicts of interest. The idea is that if an elected official is actively campaigning for a new position, their focus, maybe their resources, should be directed towards that campaign, not potentially using their current office, its staff, its resources to gain an unfair advantage. This automatic resignation is a key mechanism to prevent that.
So if a sitting mayor decides, okay, I'm running for governor, the moment they officially file that COC for governor, they're technically no longer the mayor.
Generally, yes, that's the effect. However, there was an important clarification from the Supreme Court in the Miranda v. Abaya case in 2004. They clarified that this rule applies specifically when they are running for a different position. If an elected official files for re-election to the same post they currently hold, they are not considered automatically resigned.
Ah, okay, that distinction makes sense. You can run to keep your job without losing it instantly. What about those who weren't elected but were appointed to their positions, like cabinet secretaries or agency heads? Is the rule the same for them?
No, it's different. The rule for appointed officials is stricter, actually, and it's outlined in Section 26 of the Omnibus Election Code. They are deemed resigned from their posts upon the filing of a COC for any elective position. Doesn't matter if it's the same level, higher, lower, or a different type of office altogether. Any elected position triggers it.
Huh. Why the different, and you said stricter, treatment between elected and appointed officials here?
Well, the rationale centers on preserving the integrity and the impartiality of government operations. Appointed officials usually serve at the discretion of a higher authority. Right? The concern is that if they are actively campaigning for an elected post, their decisions and actions in their current appointed role might be swayed, maybe unconsciously, by their political ambitions. The law aims to prevent any potential use or even the appearance of using their appointed position to influence the election. The Quinto v. Comlick case in 2010 offers more context on this for appointed officials.
Okay, so filing a COC can have really immediate and quite significant consequences for people already in public service. It really depends on their status, elected or appointed, and what office they're aiming for next. That's critical. Now, let's shift gears slightly. Imagine someone files a COC, everything seems fine, but then circumstances change, maybe a serious health issue, or they just have a change of heart. Is there a way to back out, to withdraw from the race? And if they do, can someone else take their place?
Yes, definitely. Philippine election law anticipates these situations through something called candidate substitution. It's detailed in Section 77 of the Omnibus Election Code. This allows for the replacement of a candidate specifically in cases of death, withdrawal, or disqualification.
Okay, substitution. How does that process work? Can just anyone step in, like a friend or family member?
Not quite that simple. There are specific rules, particularly for candidates who are affiliated with a political party. If the original candidate who filed the COC withdraws or passes away or is officially disqualified by COMELEC, their political party is generally permitted to substitute them with another member of the same party. That's key. But the substitute candidate also has to jump through hoops. They must file their own COC within a specific period set by COMELEC. And, of course, they have to meet all the legal qualifications for the office themselves and comply with all the relevant deadlines.
Right, so it has to be someone from the same party, and they have to qualify on their own merit. What about independent candidates, though? The ones not backed by a party?
Well, that's a crucial difference. No substitution is allowed for independent candidates if they withdraw or are disqualified. Since they aren't affiliated with a political party, there's no party mechanism to nominate a replacement for them. If they're out, they're out.
I see. And what's the formal procedure if a candidate wants to withdraw? Can they just, put out a press release?
No, it needs to be more formal than that. The withdrawal must be voluntary, clearly, and formalized through a written notice submitted directly to Kamala, and it has to be done before the election day itself. And as we just discussed, if they withdraw within the allowed time frame set by Kamala, their political party might still have the option to field a substitute. The specific deadline for substitution due to withdrawal is usually the end of the official candidate substitution period announced by Kamala for that election.
Okay, so there's a structured way to get in the race with the COC and a structured way to get out, sometimes with a backup plan for the parties. But what if someone maybe shouldn't have been allowed to file in the first place? What if it turns out they don't actually meet the necessary qualifications, like residency or citizenship?
Right. That leads us neatly into the issue of disqualification. A candidate can indeed be disqualified for various legal reasons. These can range from serious offenses like, say, vote buying or engaging in terrorism, to simply not meeting the fundamental requirements for the office, things like residency rules, age minimums, or citizenship requirements.
And what are the consequences if a candidate is disqualified? What happens then?
Well, if a disqualification petition is successful, their certificate of candidacy is effectively canceled. They are legally barred from running in that particular election. Furthermore, Kamala actually has the authority, either on its own initiative, which is legally termed motu proprio.
Motu proprio on its own impulse or initiative.
Exactly. So Kamala can act on its own, or if someone files a proper verified petition, to actually cancel or deny a COC right from the start before things get too far.
What would prompt Kamala to take such a strong action on its own without someone filing a complaint?
The most critical ground for that is material misrepresentation in the COC itself. This means if the candidate provides false information that is significant material to their eligibility, their qualifications, or any other required detail in the COC, Kamala can step in and cancel it. So honesty and accuracy in that initial filing are absolutely paramount. You can't lie about meeting the requirements.
Got it. So that initial COC is not just a formality. The information has to be truthful and accurate, or it can be yanked. Now, we touched on withdrawal earlier, just to button that up. Once someone formally withdraws, what's the immediate impact on them as far as the election goes?
Okay, so once a candidate formally withdraws by submitting that written notice to Kamala, they essentially lose all the rights and privileges associated with being a candidate. For instance, and most obviously, their name will not appear on the official ballot. They're out of the running. And as we mentioned, depending on the timing and their party affiliation, they might be able to be substituted, but their own candidacy is over.
This whole process, from filing to potential withdrawal or disqualification, seems very carefully designed, trying to ensure fairness and order in the elections, I suppose. Now, there's one final point in our sources that sounds particularly interesting, this idea of legal shields that might come into play once a COC is filed, especially concerning ongoing legal cases. Can you shed some light on that?
Yes, that's an interesting aspect. This refers mainly to Section 13 of Republic Act No. 3019, which is the Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act. This provision offers let's say, a degree of protection to individuals running for public office who might be facing existing criminal or administrative cases. Specifically, it generally prohibits their suspension from their current public office during the election period.
Wait, so if someone who is, say, a government official is running for office and they happen to be facing a graft charge, they typically can't be suspended from their current job during the campaign season.
That's the general principle, yes. The Supreme Court has interpreted this to mean that a public officer who has filed a COC, doesn't matter if it's for re-election or for a different position, generally cannot be suspended during the election period. This applies to both criminal and administrative cases. However, and this is a critical exception, this protection applies unless the suspension is specifically allowed by Kamala.
Ah, so Kamala holds the key again. They can override that protection.
Exactly. Kamala retains the ultimate authority. The underlying purpose of this provision, Section 13, is really to ensure that the electoral process isn't unfairly influenced or disrupted, to prevent politically motivated legal cases timed specifically to harass candidates or derail their campaigns. But it's not an absolute shield. Kamala can weigh the situation and permit a suspension if they deem it necessary, balancing the legal process with the right to run for office.
Fascinating. It really shows how Kamala acts as a referee in so many different aspects of the election. This has been incredibly insightful. So just to wrap up, the certificate of candidacy is truly the foundational document, isn't it? It marks the official intention to run, but the simple act of filing it sets in motion this whole cascade of distinct legal consequences at various stages. We've touched on its connection, or maybe disconnection now, from premature campaigning, the crucial resignation rules for incumbents, the possibilities for substitution, grounds for disqualification, and even this interaction with ongoing legal cases. Understanding these details really gives you a much richer, deeper understanding of the initial steps in Philippine elections, beyond just knowing a form exists.
Precisely. Grasping these nuances like the Panera ruling or the ipso facto resignation rule moves you beyond just surface-level knowledge. It gives you, the listener, a much clearer picture of the foundational steps and the quite intricate legal framework that governs Philippine elections. It's about understanding the why behind the what.
Definitely. So, here's something to think about. Considering all these rules we've discussed, how might the precise timing of filing a COC strategically influence a potential candidate's actions, especially regarding their current position? And what does this intricate dance tell us about the balance, or maybe the tension, between individual political ambition and maintaining the integrity of public service? Or maybe consider this. With premature campaigning largely permissible now before the official period, what are the potential long-term implications for the way campaigns unofficially start? Does it favor those with existing resources or name recognition even more?
Those are vital questions. They really get you thinking about the strategic calculations and maybe even the systemic effects embedded within these election laws. Food for thought, definitely.
Indeed. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today into this really essential aspect of Philippine election law. Until our next exploration.